Welcome to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where we help farmers, ranchers, and business owners create a seamless transition plan for the future. From retirement to ownership transfer, we protect what you've built and guide you every step of the way.
Hey there, welcome back to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast. If you're just tuning in, this is part 2 of my chat with attorney Brittany Faust of Neff Law. Last week, we talked about the basics of buy-sell agreements and contracts for deed. And today, we're diving into the tough stuff, what can go wrong and how to protect both sides when the deal gets real. Let's jump back in. I had a listener that was talking about possibly selling their farmland on a contract for deed to their child that lives, within an arm's reach from their main farmstead. So they're all in one area. They, recommend that they have an appraisal, but the appraisal costs $2,000 to $3,000. Well, I don't want to spend $2,000 to $3,000 to have an appraisal, and then you're pinching pennies to save dollars. But on the flip side, so then in talking with this individual, said, well, this is what I've seen. This is what, you should really talk to your accountant about it. Well, my brother sold his farm. You always get those scenarios. My brother sold his to his son, and they didn't have to have an appraisal for the property. Well, I can't speak for what their situation is and who their advisors were that they were working with. And just like you mentioned a minute ago, if those advisors aren't keeping up on what's happening with IRS tax code and what's happening with legislature and so forth, then they're really going to be putting themselves in a pickle. And that they could just as well be going to that attorney and just say, just give me a contract for deed. That's all I care about. And if the attorney naturally doesn't advise them on these things and they're not going to the accountant, nobody's going to know the difference. It still falls back on your shoulders as the seller.
Yep. I mean, the risk is on the seller. Now, it's not that you can't sell the land without an appraisal. You absolutely can. Obviously, people do it. It's not advisable. There's a difference. I don't think that if you really got into a conversation with an attorney who practices regularly in that area or talk to your accountant, I don't think you would get the advice from them to say, you're fine, you don't need to get an appraisal. Most of the time, at least.
Right.
There might be some odd circumstance that people feel comfortable with that. But if you're selling farmland, a significant amount of wealth transfer, I don't know why it would not be recommended. And like where I live, there's, 4 counties kind of surrounding in this area that are regional area, and you can have wildly different valuations for land from one side of the county to the other. So how am I going to feel comfortable as an attorney saying, I think that land, I'm seeing appraisals come in between $1,500 and $2,500. Just put it at $2,000. You should be good. I don't know that for sure. And then if you have more than one child and all of a sudden, you're selling to your son and you have a daughter and she's like, well, how do you know that was fair market value? I'm still here. I'm still part of the family. Why is he getting such a good deal and I'm left with what? And that isn't the only consideration, but I see that happening after people die. You don't always see it while mom and dad are living, but as, one parent passes away, that question comes up. It happened in, my own family. There were questions as to a sale of land and the fairness to it. And it's nice for both parties to point to, well, this is how we know it was fair because we got it appraised. Or, mom or dad could say, we got it appraised. He's been farming with us this whole time. So we decided it was fair to know, yeah, this is what it would be worth it on fair market value if it went out to a third party sale. But because he's our son and there's been sweat equity and whatever else, we decided to sell it to him for this. But you have something to fall back on. And on the legal side of it, the IRS side of it, you have something to point at. And with the IRS, if you have given a break on the sale price, you've given a gift, and you probably have done a gift tax return for that difference between the appraised value and what the actual purchase price is.
Right. And you have everything documented there, because that's what I talk all the time, CYA and document. So if you want to give them a gift, great. The property is worth $1 million, but you only want to sell it to them for $500,000. That's fine. Then you file a gift tax return for the remainder for the gift. It's just these little things that you think are a headache right now, but wait till you'd get down the road and something would happen, and you could be gone by this point, but you're leaving that headache up to your family or your spouses or what have you. And then if you haven't had an appraisal done on that property before you're selling it, and you get audited, the statute of limitations is, up, you get audited, and they look at it, then the IRS could require their own appraisal, and then they could determine that value much higher than what it would have been 15 years, 10 years ago when you were selling it.
Yeah, basically the IRS can impute income and say, well, you should have been paying income taxes and a capital gain based on X. And you only were at Y, and then that imputed income, and I don't know what penalties, I don't know what the penalty schedule is or anything like that. But yeah, then you'd be looking at, I'm sure, fines and penalties from the IRS, and then having to pay what they say you didn't pay.
Yeah. And go back, and then plus, yes, you've got penalties and interest on that. And
they can go back 7 years. So one thing, we talked about capital gains, or kind of touched on capital gains, and that's something that it's a dollar amount trigger for, I think it's a 0%. Then does it go to 15% and 20%, I believe, are the three thresholds. And it, depends on how much more money you're getting. So if you inherited the land in 1990, your basis is going to be 1990's land value or what you purchased it at. But if you inherited it, you're looking at a date of death valuation. With farms, we see a lot of inheritance versus sales at the generation that we're at right now. Not always, though. And then, so you're looking at that value from either date of inheritance or date of purchase, so when seller acquired the land, to the value of sale today. So that capital gain, if you are selling it all at once, I would, unless you just acquired 100% of that land pretty recently, you're probably going to be incurring a capital gain tax, I would think, with land values today. You might not, but most likely I would at least be anticipating a capital gain tax on that. With a contract for deed, you're getting that income over time. So you're getting, you might be getting $1 million or, in principle, or get the interest, but you're getting it over 10 to 15 years. So you might not be getting that capital gain tax. Again, this is why talking with the CPA and talking through some of these options is good, because that might be more tax beneficial for you than a straight out sale.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Because then you're not realizing all of those gains in 1 year, and you're spreading it out over a period of 15 years. And two, then you can budget for your income as well, because this is what I'm getting for annual payments or semi-annual, whatever the payment structure looks like, and then you can plan. So
for retirement, that is very nice, because some people are not minded in the, getting a lump sum and then trying to figure out, how do I make that last for years? It's probably a good amount of money, but how do I make that money work for me? I mean, financial advisors, I can't stress enough, use these people as your tools, because They're there to help you. But if you're getting money over time, that can be very beneficial for you, especially if you're used to an income coming in like that. Than just basically stopping your annual income or your biannual income for one lump sum at one time. That can be overwhelming.
Right. Right. So what happens, Brittany, are you familiar with this side of it? If mom and dad have a contract for deed, they've spent down all of their assets, all their cash assets. They don't own anything else, but maybe their home. And now they need assisted care or some sort of skilled care, and they end up in the nursing home. But you're still making payments to them on a contract for deed, and they've depleted all cash assets. What happens with that contract? Can they continue to make the payments on the contract, or does that contract get called in full to pay down?
No, I'm not confident in my answer in this. I thought at one time, at least, and I haven't looked at this in over 5 years, I would say.
Okay.
And I believe at that time, the payments that you were receiving, whether it's annually, would have to go toward your care, minus whatever the allowance for what Medicaid usually would allow in your bank account on a monthly basis could stay back, but everything else would have to go toward the care instead of having to basically accelerate that contract for deed. But I am not 100% on that. I would have to double check to be confident.
Okay. Well, that's something that we could probably talk about on another podcast episode and answer some of those questions. Oh, it's a beast, and it's something that, and it changes constantly. So figuring out the best way to protect you and your assets and so forth really is all a case-by-case scenario as well. So with having those, selling your property, and if someone was to come back, another family member, you've got your bases covered, you have an appraisal done, you've got it written down, you've got everything documented. So family members and non-farming sibling, if they were to come back and say, hey, you gave my brother a 50% discount, have you seen those situations happen where they wanted to litigate that and say, I don't agree with you giving a 50% discount, but there's the non-farming family siblings that they haven't been back for how many years? They don't know, they weren't around. They maybe just came for the holidays, and they haven't sat through the thick of working together with mom and dad on the workload, the finances.
I have never seen it litigated. I am not a litigator, so I've never seen it litigated. I also would question if they would have a good case on that, unless there was a capacity saying that mom or dad or both did not have the capacity to enter into a contract type of argument, because mom and dad owned the land and they can do what they want with that land. Kids are not entitled to an inheritance. And I think that is often forgotten or not understood.
Right.
We're not promised an inheritance as children of our parents. And if our parents want to give all of their assets to a charity and leave us in the dust, they can. You can fully disinherit your children if you would like to. North Dakota, you can't disinherit your spouse fully, but you can disinherit your kids. And unless you had, that's the only thing I can think of offhand is, maybe some capacity claims saying mom or dad didn't have the capacity to sign the contract, or if there was undue influence that they could prove, for something to try to get that contract undone. But just saying that it's not fair is not going to be, in my opinion, a good claim.
Right. Okay. So, that just goes to show why it's so important to make sure that you document and that you've done your due diligence. You've worked with everyone on your team to make sure that you've covered all your bases for your documentation and establishing that fair market value, or giving a gift. You've filed a gift tax return for the difference, so forth. One of the other things is that a lot of listeners don't think of is title work. That what here in North Dakota, I can't speak for some of the other states, and maybe Brittany, but here we have abstracts for the showing what that history was on the land, if there's any liens, encumbrances, mortgages, etc. And we want to make sure that there is some sort of a clear title. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how important that is in these transactions?
Yes, I wish more people would do title work on family land. It is not very common for families to update the abstract for the farmland and get a title opinion done, even on contract for deeds, in my experience. But what a title opinion does is it goes from patent, from the very first person to own that piece of land until present day. And it looks at everything that's ever been recorded with the county recorder's office. It looks at the taxes that have been paid. It looks at any judgments that have been filed against the individuals who have owned. It's a full record of that property. And there have been instances that families think they own 100% of the land, but it just so happens that that little parcel, or that 160 acres, was missed from great uncle's deed to granddad or whoever. There are missing links in title all the time. It happens very, very frequently. North Dakota does have ways of fixing title issues that are very, very old. There's lots of different things that you can do to make it right. But if you don't do that title work, you would never know. If you just have a deed, which I do a lot of probate administration, and I will tell you, I can only think of 2 estates that they actually updated title work and got title opinions completed before transferring the interest out to heirs. Oh. And it's a cost. It's very expensive to do it. And it's not the right way to do it, but it is a general practice, I would say, to not have title work done. But it is very, very important to get title work done as you're passing through generations. Hopefully there's no issues found and you just have clean title and you have a title opinion to show that, and they stick that into the abstract, and it goes to the new owner and they go about their merry way. But I have people come in here and they have abstracts that weren't updated since the 1950s, and who knows what's on there.
Right. We've seen those. It's like one of those occupational hazards where they come into the office, and if anybody has seen an abstract, typically they're like a legal size document. It's bound at the top. And most cases they take and they roll them up tightly and tie them and put them in a shoebox or something. And I
never look at them again. Yeah.
No, and I see them come in and it's okay, now we have to try to unravel this and get it to the attorney so they can do their title opinion. And that work typically is something that is paid by the seller because they're providing clear title to the buyer.
So that's negotiable.
Okay.
So the buyer pays for the title opinion and the seller pays for the update to the abstract, kind of a combination of obligation for the payment there. Sometimes it's all paid by the seller. If there is a title issue that needs to be cured, almost always, not always, but almost always, the seller is paying for the curative work to make sure that there's the title.
Okay. Yep. That it's taken care of. And
finance that, just in the event that there are some financial issues with the seller that they don't have the ability to pay, the buyer might decide to foot the bill and maybe reduce the amount that's being paid toward purchase price and have that amount go toward those costs instead, type of thing.
Okay. Yep. Make sure that all those dots have been connected through the period of preparing for the closing. I mean, really the closing, there's, a few things that need to be done when they sign those documents to do the contract for deed once, and then the amortization schedule. And there is also a mortgage I've seen where they'll do a mortgage and they'll sign it, but not date it. And then somebody will hold the mortgage, the deed in safekeeping until the final payment has been made on that contract. And then they wait to record the deed. So then you have the final transfer of title from the seller to the buyer, but they'll usually hold it like in an escrow or safekeeping. Is that something that you've seen done as well?
I have seen that done as well. And then I've also seen where the buyer will sign a quitclaim deed back to seller in the event that there is a breach on the buyer's side.
Oh,
so then the seller does not have to go through a legal foreclosure process.
Okay. So yes, because foreclosure can be a long, drawn out process and there's steps for that. So that would help alleviate. That's one of those precautionary items that you could put into play at the time that you close or sign the documents. Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, deed in lieu of foreclosure is usually what it's called.
Okay. So. There was something else I was thinking of. Oh, I had someone tell me a story about that I don't remember if it was a contract for deed that they had or what, but when they transferred the property, and this was something that was done back in the 80s, the property was being transferred to the new owner. Okay, so they took ownership of it. And now this individual, this friend of mine, is wanting to buy this property. But when they went and they did all the title work and they could see that the deed wasn't recorded. So here all these years, this individual that thought he owned it, he's elderly now, he's had it since the 80s, but thought it was recorded. Well, here they must have had it and their house burned down. So that deed was signed, not recorded in the courthouse, and it burned in their house.
Oh.
So one of those things that could have been prevented had they just maybe known the steps on what they needed to do, or someone would have advised them on that. So I always tell people, if you're holding something, make sure you have it in a safe deposit box at your bank and you're not the only signer on that safe deposit box. So if you pass away or can't get into, someone else can, or you have to have it in a fireproof safe someplace. But if your house goes up in smoke, you better be able to know where those documents are at, where you're storing them. But that was, so I think
the deed signed again?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I'll have to touch base with that friend to see if they did get it signed, because I know that's something, and who knows how many people were deceased in the meantime, and then estates that they have to get through. And if they're deceased, then you have to deal with the PRs, personal representatives from those past states and estates. What a hassle.
Oh, it can be a big mess. Yes.
What a hassle. That's why it's so important to,
that's why you get title work done.
Yes, get your title work done. Get your abstracts updated and get your appraisals done.
Yes.
You can establish that basis, what your price is, and just to keep all the vultures or the other family members at bay. I call them vultures because sometimes they come back and you've seen it too. After someone passes away, now their little hands are sticky and they're like, hey, we're coming in to dive bomb for what we think is ours.
Yep.
So, everyone. All right. Well, any final advice or words of wisdom, as I say, Brittany, that you have for families that could be going through this? Any?
I cannot stress enough to talk with professionals that you are comfortable with, and that those professionals are comfortable with this area of law, an area of expertise as well. You want to talk to, bare minimum, your CPA and a lawyer. Financial advisors can also come in to play with a lot of different things retirement-wise. So if you are wanting to get that farm to the next generation and you are looking at retirement, financial advisors have a lot of other tools that I am not going to be able to advise somebody on, a CPA might not be able to advise on, that they can bring to the table too and really get a good plan for you. Kind of an all-encompassing plan so that your bases are covered on the legal side, the tax side, and for your retirement so that your financial standing in retirement is good.
Right. Yep. You don't want to cut yourself short where you've tied your hands and you don't have any operating funds or funds for your living expenses. But on the other hand, you want to make sure that your taxes are covered and you're not creating a tax consequence for yourself. And and still being able to maintain that legacy and pass it on to that next generation.
Yep.
Yep. Very good advice. Well, Brittany, this has been incredibly helpful. Before we wrap up, if someone listening wanted to reach out to you or learn more about how you could help them, how can they reach you?
You can call my office at 701-577-2000 or reach me by email. My email is bkf@neflawnd.com. Heidi will have that written out for you.
Yeah.
And I'm only licensed in North Dakota, but we do have another estate planner who works out of Texas. She works remotely, but she is licensed in North Dakota, but licensed in Montana and Texas as well.
Okay. Yep. Very good. And I believe that is listed on your website.
Yeah, Caitlin is her name.
Okay. Very good. So you've got those resources on there. We'll make sure that it gets listed in the show notes. So that way you can just click right on the link and that'll take you right to Brittany's website and you can be able to email her or see more about how she could possibly help you. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for breaking this all down today and helping. This has been fun. You and I could always talk forever on stuff because we've got was so much to talk about. And I always am kind of one of those nerds. I get excited about this kind of stuff. And not everybody thinks this is exciting because nobody wants to talk about death and estate planning because that means I'm dying tomorrow. But no, it's the things because we can see what has happened if you don't have a plan. And just the nature of that beast that will rear its ugly head if something doesn't happen and something isn't planned for. So it's so important to make sure that you have a plan and you've covered all your bases and you are working with competent professionals and someone that is, if you don't feel comfortable with this person, then interview the next person and make sure that you are working with somebody that you feel confident with.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
All right. Well, it's not meant to be overwhelming. That's why you have a team of professionals here to help you. So, the key is really just to go into this with your eyes wide open. Don't skip the appraisal and don't just rely on those handshakes and say, we'll figure it out later. Because those families, the families who succeed are the ones that take time to document and plan and protect what you've built so hard, what you've worked so hard to build. And make sure that you're basing it on the hard numbers, the hard facts, and not just emotions or feelings. And, I got to protect this son because they're out here helping us farm. But yet I really feel tied to because somebody's chirping in our ear over here on this side that might be off the farm because they're starting to feel that pressure. Mom and dad are getting older. I really need to start coming home more and helping because I want to stay on good graces. And I could tell you how many times I've heard that, these horror stories where someone has said, I have to make sure that I go home. And I probably told you this one. I have to get home because I got to stay in the will. So I better get home for Thanksgiving. I'm like, what? Why are you even talking like that? And you wouldn't say it if you weren't thinking it. So it's those emotional things that tie back to, well, I'm entitled to. So, all right. Well, I think we've covered so many bases today. Make sure you talk to your attorney, get the valuation, the appraisals, build the plan, make sure you keep the farm in the family for decades to come. So at the end of the day, this isn't just about selling land. It's about setting the next generation up to succeed. Until next time, I'll see you between the ditches.
Thanks for listening to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where your future is our focus. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and visit us at pathfinderlegacy.com to start building your transition plan today.